Sorry. I'm the limiting factor here.
Okay, hi, everybody. So, I'm Charese Jordan Moore, and this is a session on how to hold an effective meeting. Basically, order we. So, I want to tell you a little bit about myself in way of introduction, because why are we up here to tell you about effective meeting? I'm a room elder at Max Presbyterian Church in the city in the Oliver neighborhood. I will be finishing my first term as a ruling elder at the end of this year. I've been nominated for a second term, so guess I've done okay so far. And I've been a Presbyterian for 5 years. So I'm new to Presbyterianism, and we talk about meetings. Presbyterianism can seem to an outsider kind of hypocritical. In terms of meetings, I have been involved in community meetings, corporate meetings, nonprofits. I was the deputy director for an organization called Interfaith Worker Justice for many years, went around the country doing meetings, and I was just thinking in way of introduction that so I've been going for 50 years of meetings, running some of them and so forth, and
Rolling your eyes and others.
with an average of probably 4 meetings a week. I have 3 next week. I've either been to or around at least 10,000 meetings. It's kind of scary. So that would be my background and how I come to you today.
I'm here because Charese asked me to come. My name is Mary Speers. I'm a retired minister member of the Presbytery. I also happen at the moment for my sins to be chairing Commission on Ministry. So now you know who to complain to before they complain. We know each other because I, for a while, was moderator of the session in Knox Church. And I too have been to a bunch of meetings. And yeah, and as I'm sure all of you have, if you've gotten as far as being an elder, so. So we all know what, we all know what we hate about meetings, and we all know what we love about meetings. I mean, I actually do love meetings when, I am in the ministry, I'll tell myself down. I'm in the ministry not to be needed and not to be loved, but because I am a spirit power junkie. I just love being there, being in the room when the spirit starts to move. And that happens mostly in meetings, at least in the PCUSA. Sometimes it happens in church, but a lot more frequently it happens in meetings. So I guess that's it. Where are we? Oh, yes. So that leads me into the next things, which Steve Noble already did some of my work for me. The other reason that Charese asked me to be part of this is she apparently during an elder training planning session, I said something really inspiring about ruling elders. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I will do my best to remember. And it really does have to do with this spiritual leadership there. It's one thing to be told you are the spiritual leadership of the church, and it's another to actually say, most of our response to that is, oh, I am not worthy, I am not worthy. And I often at around nominating time would preach a sermon about that and say, well, do you want anybody serving on session who thinks, well, of course, it's about time the church got around to having me on session. I mean, this church really needs my leadership. You wouldn't want somebody like that on session. So all of us feel the same way. In terms of running meetings, I did not go to PCUSA seminary, so I don't know if they teach you how to moderate a meeting, but in my world, it was just that somehow some magical thing happened when they mashed on your head that you were then able to moderate meetings. And the thing is, I kind of was. And that's where I want to get started on this business about me being, any of us being spiritual leaders. As far as I know, the Reformed tradition, and specifically the Presbyterians and the Reformed Church in America, are the only Protestant denominations that ordain lay people. That all of you are, in a sense, in the Catholic term thing, you're in holy orders, you've been ordained, and someone has mashed on your head. And I served in a church that was not a Presbyterian church, and we had wonderful church leaders, but it wasn't the same thing. And to me, I grew up in the Presbyterian church. My father was a Presbyterian elder. All these people in my family were clergy and Presbyterian elders. There is nothing like a Presbyterian elder. And during those 40 years that Carl was talking about this morning, when we were fighting about LGBTQ people in the church and everything, I was, just about ready to leave on a number of occasions, but what kept me in the church was Presbyterian elders. And the kind of steadiness and spiritual leadership that I experienced from those elders as first candidate for ministry and then as a pastor. And I really am deeply respectful of Presbyterian elders. And I just can't impress upon you enough the fact that it's not you individually as a sinner and you're sinner redeemed by Christ or anything like that. It's that you have been called, you have been elected, that's a confirmation of the call, and you have been redeemed. And somehow or other, you have these mystical powers, and mostly it has to do with just access. When you serve communion, you are, your role is to say to people, David, this is the body of Christ broken for you. And to say to each one of those people, say that, including the pastor, when you serve the pastor, because the pastor needs to hear it too. And that kind of leadership is something that I think a lot of elders are afraid to take on because they think it might be arrogant. But it's that humility that is saying to you, I don't deserve this, I'm not worthy of this. That humility is what keeps you honest as a leader, but you are also, you're expected by the people who elected you and ordained you. You're expected to be their leader. So that's the end of my pep talk for spiritual leadership, and hopefully, to let you know that, you're supposed to do it, step into it, fake it till you make it.
The other thing that I would add to that, and it was brought up earlier, so it's interesting that in all the sessions have sort of fed into this one. So when you're at the end, you may hear some repetition, but repetition is good. I think it's really important for ruling elders to recognize the purity with teaching elders and ruling elders. And I know, for instance, I came into a church that was very teaching elder dominant, and almost like I spent most of my youth in a non-denominational church, but my spread out family is Baptist, and in a lot of churches, the pastor or the bishop, as it may be, what they say goes. And I think, was it you, Steve, who said that is similar in the Catholic Church and so on? Okay, so yeah, so I think that's just very important to know When decisions are being made and figuring out how your session meetings run and so forth. And
So who's in charge of the meeting is everybody. Because when you run a meeting yourself, you know how hard it is as one person to bring a meeting to order. It helps a lot if some people, other people in the meeting are helping.
so let's get down a little bit to making a meeting work. And one of the things that we, so let me ask you, what are the things that you all hate most about meetings or dislike? Let's start with one.
I'll actually make it some of the positive thing. When somebody has all these good ideas, throwing out, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this, we should do that. But then at the end of this soliloquy, it's like, well, who's gonna do that? And it's big silence.
There you
It's like,
go.
Yeah.
Well, then all those good ideas, you waste 5 minutes.
All right, so that would definitely make your meeting not effective, right? What else bothers people about me? There you go. That's the number one thing. That comes out of the list that their meetings are just too long. So, Susan?
So I was saying because one of the things is, because like you keep on going off in a circle. And, you know, maybe somebody always has something word, and they always have something again, and like, it's.
Anybody else? Voice dominates.
When it's a very emotional issue, for example, COVID has been an incredible concept for us to deal with in session because we had to decide when to open up the sanctuary again. How to deal with the possibility of contagion, when to determine that the contagion was low enough to go ahead and open up and things like that. What about masks? And some of the people on session really had a strong sense of emotion and ownership in some of the discussion that they had, and it was an exhausting process. When you said it's never ending, it felt like it was going on and on. Exhausting. So.
Yeah, so, sir, what's your name?
I'm done.
Got it.
One thing that bugs me about meetings, a lot of times meetings come together, and you just spend a whole lot of time or whatever, so easily handled with an email or a memo. Yes, details that you don't need to call me.
Absolutely. And Jen?
That was mine exactly. When a meeting could be an email.
Okay. These are.
Or when an email should be a meeting.
Yep, that's it.
That happens. So we're going to be touching on, I think, all of those things in our presentation. And I'm going to start with one of my pet peeves, and also one thing I think that meeting can make your meetings go more smoothly, and that is meeting preparation. So some of us show up at the meeting and we probably have not thought about what's going to happen at that meeting, or what has happened pretty much since the last session meeting. So one of the things I certainly experienced with the first session meeting I went to was that we were not given the agenda ahead of time. We got a booklet of papers and so on, and then the first thing was the review of the minutes. And the meeting disintegrated right there at the minutes.
When everybody sat there and read the minutes.
They read the minutes, and no, not just that, read the minutes, and then stopped on specific items and started discussing the agenda items before you got to the rest of the agenda. So one of the most important things I think to make for a successful and effective meeting is to have an agenda. So I hope all your churches are doing that. And to have it out beforehand so people can read it, as well as the minutes of the last meeting. So that they can do that and be familiar with it and get through that at the beginning. That committees meet and prepare and distribute written reports. I know, yeah, I see a roll on.
It could just be bullet points.
You need bullet points, have to be fancy. And conversely, if you're expecting the session to approve a costly contract with lots of details and so on, then to give it to them ahead of time so they can go through it and read it and prepare any questions, financial reports ahead of time. All of that makes for a meeting going more smoothly, and especially if you're like really top tier meetings. Some sessions I know have the items that are just for information, or just, you know, sometimes the news report is that they sent 9 cards and so on and everything. Those things can be items that are in the omnibus, so that we receive them as a session, but they're not things that need to make people talk and give verbal reports that don't need to be lengthy, but sometimes I think when people think that they have the attention of everybody, they have to talk longer to make it seem worthwhile, like they did something. So there's a lot of things we can receive as information. Susan?
So, are you saying that they would thought, for the
Yes. That can often be helpful. So to give time to the things that you really need to discuss and discern about. There's 6 things that the book of order requires sessions to vote on, and they're electing the ruling elders to serve as commissioners and to elect the clerk and the treasurer, approving the budget, membership matters, like, you know, receiving transfers, donations, etc., calling congregational meetings, approving examination of ruling elders and deacons, and worship matters such as baptism, the Lord's Supper, etc. Now we know that over the course of a year, we look at a lot more things than that the session has to. Those are the things that you absolutely have to do and vote on.
One more thing. Session also has to approve every public fundraising effort of the church. Anytime anybody wants to stand up and worship and say we're raising money for such and such, that has to be approved by session. The reason for that is not gatekeeping so much as session making sure that people aren't being asked for a gazillion things all at once. It has something to do with budgeting and making sure that the fundraisers actually raise some money. Yes. Yes. Yep.
And here are a couple of other things that are not necessarily materials related, but that will help your meetings go smoother. And that's, you know, session members need to be at least conversant with the book of order. So having your session members have the book of order and be able to refer to it is useful. Also the church bylaws. So the book of order requires us to do certain things. Our bylaws must include those, but can't exceed them, and so on. And so, and
Not like, where's bylaw? Oh, I don't know, so-and-so had, but she died.
yes, we have quorum. So you know, that kind of thing. So, and to like to have the, do we have quorum really like meetings in a row? It's like, come on, you guys, and so on. And the other thing is We're also supposed to have an administrative manual, policy and procedures. How much time gets wasted discussing how we do things and what's our church culture and so on, and everybody knows it in their head, and you're a new elder, so you should just know it too, and absorb it by osmosis. I've been an elder almost 3 years, and somebody told me recently that the reason that I didn't know a certain policy is that I had not asked the right person. Now, I belong to a very small church, and I can assure you that I asked at least 10 people over 2 years. And no, I'm not the only one who didn't know where this was. Apparently held secretly in somebody's head, and they were insulted that I asked because they worked very hard on the policy. But okay, but it's not yours, and so we make it available to everybody, so people can refer to it and be self-sufficient. So I think preparation for your meeting is very, very important. And not only in the basics of what's happening, sometimes there's controversy brewing at the church, and we all know it. I have a recent example that somehow people got it into their head for, I guess, a good reason, but our minister of music was not going to come to church on Sunday, Christmas Sunday. Christmas Sunday, I mean, doesn't come around every year. It so happens that he's off on the 4th Sunday. And there was a lot of, he likes to be with his grandchildren. And I think he has 3 Sundays he's supposed to be there. 4th Sunday is not one of them. And people were going like that and everything. And it was like, finally it occurred to me. I got kind of worked up too. I think music is important in Christmas service. But it turned out, and I realized before session meeting marker person, has anybody asked him? And no one had. So I asked him and he said, oh yeah, I'm planning to be there. In fact, they asked me about that in the summer. Person who asked him had forgotten. So, just a little bit of pre-work and a little communication, those will make the meetings go much more smooth.
And I'm going to give a couple of practical things here in the way of a review. Make sure the agenda goes out ahead of time, and what works best is for the clerk. I know we have one clerk here, we have 2. Anyway, the clerk, if the clerk and the moderator get together, it can be on the phone, but in some kind of conversation rather than email. Is better, and because you wind up talking not only about the agenda, you're not just editing a document, you're also talking about what's likely to come up and what the clerk may have heard, through even the tom-toms, and what the pastor knows. And if you have that conversation like about 10 days before the meeting, there's time to do stuff. Also, the minutes of the last meeting should go out with the agenda at the very latest. And it's often good for them to go out before that, like about halfway, or 2 weeks after the previous meeting, with a list of who said they would do what, so that people have a chance to do what they said they would do, which they may not remember. Or they may remember they said they would do something, but they're too embarrassed to ask anyone else. And the thing about committees, this gets into culture that I think is important. Culture to every congregation has its own culture, every session has its own culture, and the members are informed by the culture that the congregation happens to be from or in. For some elders feel that it's a business meeting, and why isn't it just an hour? Other elders feel like, well, they're rushing me through and they're just asking me to rubber stamp, so, and there are sessions for which pastoral care of one of the elders is part of the meeting. The group pastoral care for this elder. And, you know, you all know that when it's the case, so sometimes things have to be different. But the thing about Robert's rules is it's designed to facilitate discussion. And if the committees are doing their work, and this is a big one, but you heard about this a little bit this morning, if everybody trusts the committees, then you get a recommendation from the committee, and the session might ask a question or two, but doesn't take all the issues out and really discuss them. It can be that a session meeting is going along well and everybody's well informed, that it is something of a rubber stamp, and there is nothing wrong with that if you know what's going on, which is a reason to have all this stuff come ahead of time. I believe Shannon said if you have a major issue and you have the time, don't ever introduce something and vote on it in the same meeting. And that carries into, sometimes it takes people longer to have ideas and to mull things over. And sometimes people don't say anything, are the ones that have the most wisdom a week later. So, so that's basically it. Is if everybody knows what they're going to be talking about and has done their homework, then the meeting goes better. Just
Yeah, I just add, excuse me, there's a call, it's a call, but it's been touched on as we go, and, you know, I told you I was about those 10,000 meetings were business meetings. And I do think that we have to realize that in our church environment, it's not a straight business meeting. We take some stuff from that to get things done. But like when you said, sometimes you stop the meeting for prayer. And so we, you know, I think we need to spend as much time on that, reflections and starting the meeting in prayer, stopping the meeting in prayer. If it comes down to, it's like a tie and a contentious meeting, you know, we're not ready to make the decision. You know, like, you know, a lot of cases they might try to force the moderator to break the tie. But if that's the case, we probably need to go back for more discernment, prayer, and discussion.
that's the US Congress. Oh, little known fact. Oh, sorry. Little known fact. If the pastor is an installed pastor, the pastor is a member of session and actually can vote at any time in any meeting. If the pastor is a temporary supply or an interim or anything else where the session votes on the call, that pastor can't vote in a session meeting, even to break a tie. Do you know why? This is one of the wonderful things about Presbyterian government, because the congregation has not elected that person to the session. So that's just, if you're colleague nerd meeting, well, that's.
Okay, so I think at this point, there's a video that we'd like to play. And as you watch this video, let's just look to see if you recognize anything that's going on in your congregation.
Noble stayed just to see this video.
And I'm going to stand up. Is there anybody who has not received handouts?
Raise your hand. And then we'll go through the handouts. They've been stapled in no particular order.
I'll push play.
What? That's fine. It's
Listen, could you start the please?
better you than me.
Well, it gave it to you.
You wrote that.
It's not like that.
It would have been broken.
It's not like that.
If God wanted us to have, an order, it would have been broken. I'm out.
I hired a session rep to help us play by the rules.
Hi, man.
Well, as I was saying, I think that we need a capital campaign to fix the organ, and it is absolutely the right thing to do. We did it with the carpet, it worked great.
Yeah, if you like brown.
Okay, but my question is still, why are we even fixing the organ?
Because people like hymns.
Well, I'm not free to share their names, but many people have approached me and.
Illegal substitution, bringing in undefined and unidentified numbers of opinions.
Empowering anonymous armies of disgruntled people actually undercuts the leadership of the entire session. And it hinders their ability to make informed decisions. And it kind of leaves room for a lot of exaggeration.
I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't mind if I said their names. I just don't think it's important.
Okay, well, who are they?
Sarah
Your wife?
and me.
And
That's all. That's it.
Let's try that again.
Sarah and I don't like this.
Better.
you would be honest, I mean, singing very.
False start.
What's happening over there needs to be happening over here. Whether it's sideline conversations that we all have at the meeting or the conversations we all have in the parking lot after the meeting, session needs to be able to share what they're saying with everyone.
Yeah, then you wind up with hurt feelings and arguments.
I can understand how it might be hard to voice an unpopular opinion or let alone disagree with someone, but session works best when we can share what we're thinking and feeling with everyone.
Proceed with honesty and openness.
Okay, well, I don't care much about singing hymns either. But I don't think it matters what we decide here because our worship director rules the music ministry of United West. That's not a great joke, but it's true. Brenda is intense.
Am I the only one that's scared of Brenda?
No.
Awesome.
There. Brenda can be a little firm, but when it comes to the music at the church, I think we should leave the decision up to her.
Illegal shift. The session sets the overall style of worship at the church.
The pastor actually decides what songs are sung at the church, and while the music director totally has input there, it's you all who get to decide the direction of things like this at the church.
Wait a second. If it wasn't for Brenda, you wouldn't have any music at this church.
Excuse me, are you a member of session?
No, I'm a concerned member of the congregation who wants to make sure that people make the right decisions because I don't trust everyone at this table.
Well then. Encroachment.
Am I not allowed to be here?
Of course you are. But don't let your meeting get hijacked either. Guests and other members of the congregation are more than welcome to come, but if they wish to speak during the meeting, they actually have to get permission to speak during the meeting. Remember, you all are the elected leaders of the church, not them. This is a session meeting, not a town hall forum.
Maybe the pastor could speak to Brenda and tell her that some of us don't like the music that she's choosing.
Ineligible receiver. Triangular communication is unhealthy and unbiblical. Proceed with direct one-on-one communication. Redo.
I guess I will have a conversation with Brenda directly.
That's good. Strength.
I'm sorry, did we make a decision about the organ repair question?
Did you get any bids for the organ repairs?
No, we did not get any bids. We were sort of wondering as a committee what you all want to do, what you want to fix or replace. Also, okay.
Sorry, guys.
Can you recommend a repair place for us to?
Delay of game. Session meetings get long when committees don't do their job.
A committee's responsibility is to do the research, weigh the options, find a recommendation for the rest of session. Next time you come, bring a recommendation.
I say just let's vote to not fix the organ right now. Oh,
Illegal motion, willful disregard of Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's rules are there for a reason. This whole thing runs a lot smoother if we follow them.
okay. Well, I move that we table the fixing of the organ indefinitely.
Second.
Second.
Oh, my goodness.
A motion to table the fixing of the organ has been made and seconded. Wow,
We'll just go for a month or two without an organ and we'll see what the feedback is.
If we don't fix that organ, the leaves are going to leave. If that memorial fund paid for that organ,
Illegal block. If someone leaving this church causes you not to make the best choice, they are running this church, not you.
I know it might be hard. But you have to be willing to lose people with your decisions. In the end, you'll lose far fewer people because you'll be a healthier church. Now, are we ready to vote on the motion on the floor?
if Brenda knew you voted for this, you know what she said.
Illegal block. And the decisions the session makes are the decision of the whole session.
It doesn't matter which elder voted which way, or what any particular elder said. Anything else is discussed. All in favor of voting to indefinitely postpone the repairing of the organ, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
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 Motion carries. Touchdown.
That's my job.
Touchdown.
That's pretty good. I want a copy of that.
Okay, do you see anything there that is happening at your session?
Can we hire that guy?
I mean, I did see one thing, it was the third that I know it's happening. In the home. That would, you know, they would say, people are saying, oh, you know, we never introduce, to do that way.
Yeah, that's a big one. You have people attending session meetings, trying to disrupt and participate. And so on.
Hostage taking.
Ah,
Well, if we don't do this, then X person's going to leave the church.
that's a big one, and a big one if you have generous givers sometimes and everything.
Although, of course, nobody's supposed to know how much anybody gives. But you do
There
know.
are cases that people make it known.
Yeah,
And so on, willpower because of that. Well, I know that there are sessions that are sometimes challenged. And so forth.
And it's also the person who says, I'm going and I'm taking my pledge with you, and find out it wasn't that much. I'm taking my pledge with me, sorry.
But important that the session members support each other. That when the session makes a decision, even if, those cases that we learned where, a member may dissent or file a protest about the decision, but otherwise we make the decision as a collective and we support the decision, whether we personally agree with it or not.
Well, and filing a protest in the minutes is a different thing from calling everybody up afterwards and saying, well, the session voted this way, but I don't agree, and blah, 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 Your protest is on the record, but, and, in theory, anybody can read the minutes, but you are also not supposed to go stir the pot.
Yeah, and certainly not as soon as you get to the parking lot. So, those are just important things to remember. So we are gonna now review your handout on principles of effective meetings.
We start?
Yes.
Number one, put the good of the whole church. I'm sorry? Thanks. It's in the handout, and is sort of in the middle of the handout. It's got a line across the top. Few principles for effective meetings. Number one, put the good of the whole church before the good of an individual, ministry, committee, or team. Which is, among other things, not saying so-and-so is gonna leave the church. Recognize that it isn't always easy to tell the difference. And we all have to learn to be more aware of the lenses we look through. Be kind.
2 is start with the assumption of trust in each person around the table. I think Shannon did a whole workshop having to do with trust. And I think this is particularly important in the church environment because Steve highlighted for us that we all are given spiritual gifts and together we have all that we need. And I think the assumption of trust is that we don't assume ill intent from our siblings as we come together to do our church work.
Which can be challenging sometimes. And there's nothing that says you can't sit there yourself and pray during the meeting. You probably don't want to say, oh Lord, forgive them for they don't know what they do. At least not out loud, but yeah. Be fully present at meetings, and this is especially important in our age, so which means don't check your email, keep your cell phone turned off. And I'm guilty of this. Especially on Zoom when you can get away with just about anything, and bunny slippers or I knit sometimes. But I also have to say I knit in meetings if I'm not running the meeting. It's a way to cut down on how much I talk. Because, for all of us, everything I don't say shortens the meeting. And that's for everyone. So, anyway.
Interact according to your group values. And among these are faithfulness to Christ, respect, cooperation, celebration, mutual support, and accountability. In other words, we're Christian folks, go into the meeting with the best intentions and, don't go in loaded for beer on a particular issue and so on. Let's have civil discussion and loving discussion and get to the right decision.
Okay, make space for everyone to participate and don't talk over each other. There's value to the Robert's rules thing about putting your hand up and waiting for the moderator to call on you. It seems a lot of session meetings are more informal than that, but that's exactly how the person who has to comment on everything that gets said gets to do that. Anyway.
Focus on the solution, not the problem. And we can get stirred up a lot with what the horrible problem is and so on, and spend a lot of time and not get past that to trying to figure out what the solution is. And sometimes the solutions are simple, not always, but sometimes they are.
Or you can't solve the whole problem, but you can figure out what you can do about part of it. So, we already touched on this, but debate decisions during the meeting and champion decisions when it's over. Which is another version of a decision of the session is a decision of the whole session. Who voted which way? We're not the US Congress. There's no record of that. It's one of the ways in which we are not like the US Congress.
Honestly and respectfully challenge each other. I think this one is very important. Be willing to tolerate the discomfort that comes with that. Without that, the best decisions can't be made, and we have a whole handout on how to have great conversations. I think we're not going to have time to get to. but, at least not all of it, but very important that you speak up, particularly when your voice may make a difference. You don't have to opine on everything that happens in the meeting. But if you have something important to say it honestly, say it respectfully, say it kindly. Steve, gave us some examples of that, but definitely say it when you've had your chance to say it. On the other hand, I'll just lean in and lean out. Some of us need to do a lot more leaning out practice. So, but when you have something important to say, please do that and share.
You don't have to.
Right.
And that's one of the things that they do.
Right.
Especially if you know the decision is going that way.
Okay, put yourself in other people's shoes. While it's relatively easy to critique an idea, the far more difficult work is to truly imagine the perspective of another. And that goes back to, item 1, which is putting the good of the whole church before any individual or ministries or any good. And I'm just gonna go to, number 10 is seek to understand and not win. You're not trying to beat someone, because you're all, again, as with item 1, you're all seeking the will of Christ in all of this and trying to follow Jesus in all of this. And so it's not a question of who wins and who loses. In fact, if you have that mindset, there's a way in which nobody wins. Or, Satan wins, not Christ, or however you want to express that.
Believe in the team. So we talked about this before. While the lone genius has his or her place, it's a kind of, foundational principle of reformed thought that most decisions are best accomplished by groups of people who bring different perspectives to a task or a topic. And particularly as become more diverse, there are different ways just to look at a subject and things that you may not have thought of. And usually I think if everybody in the room agrees with me, then a whole bunch of us don't need to be there. If it's something that just one person can come up with. So we need to, remember that there is a value in the team process. Strive for consensus, but accept that ultimately the majority rules. That is basic, and even constitutionally, that rule of the majority with respect for the minority. That doesn't always happen, but that's what we're working with at this point. So at some point, the majority rules, and even if we're tempted to stamp our feet and run away with our marbles, it's not the way to behave as a session member.
I remember a congregational meeting. I wasn't moderating, Holly was. I was there, and this one person was going on and being that person in the meeting finally said, "I just don't feel like I'm being heard." And at that point, everybody had been, in their watches for the last half hour. The moderator just said very kindly to her, "Well, you're being heard, you're just not winning." But anyway.
The Spirit isn't done working when you adjourn. So that is, again, we make decisions in our meetings, but there's always room for discernment and prayer. And sometimes we need to keep praying about those decisions and trusting them as we move forward, especially if there are decisions that maybe we don't agree with. maybe the Holy Spirit will help you to accept and change, or there's ways that you can make it better. If only making it better for yourself, but that's the way the congregation, not the congregation, the session has decided to move.
Yeah, and think of, for those of you who were in Shannon's discussion this morning, remember the story of Brenda? Who didn't say anything, and didn't say anything, and finally finally did. A lot of that happens, in these meetings, and especially if something has been presented just at that meeting. And some people just, their minds just don't work that quickly. So we pray for the Spirit, just because you voted to end the meeting, you prayed and you went home, that doesn't mean the Spirit's done. So, and then that brings us to number 14, which is there will always be another meeting.
2001, so, let's get it, keep it in perspective. You don't always get every meeting or every decision, frankly, perfectly, and, we do our best. We have a calling and live to meet another day.
So
I'll figure it out, where all of the emotions are going to, and that one of the things I think to be careful of is you can always like the same group that is the majority, and you're not getting consensus, then that's something to look at, because then you've got two different groups, you've got two different.
Well, and are you getting the voice from the minority
Right.
and trying to bring that in, or are you just ignoring the minority? We know what we want to do, we have to do it.
Right.
Move out. Like, no one
yeah, just briefly, there's a few more things, yes.
Our pastor as our moderator, at the end of the meeting, goes around the circle asking each of us to comment on how we thought the meeting was. And sometimes it's been very contentious and so on, and we address that, and we indicate that, it was difficult and address the difficulty at that moment. Not re-arguing the whole picture again, just saying it was a difficult meeting, but I think we came together effectively or whatever. And it's a way to heal from my perspective.
Yes, and that's a good thing. The one thing you don't want to do is put new business at the end of the agenda. Thank you. There are a few other things in here. There's the covenant for brave conversations. You're going to get to that, right? Okay, well, we'll read it. And then here's this list of 6 items that the session has to vote on. And we talked about that. And but in case you were writing them down fast on the slide, there they are. And this little thing, this little officer training opening, true false thing, which is basically, it's fun. It's something to, to do. It's just something I'm offering to you to do and make your sessions, introduce them to the book of order. It doesn't have book of order reference numbers for a reason, because hopefully people will learn to look stuff up in the book of order. But it's true or false about who does what in the church. The pastor, for example, the pastor decides who is to be removed from membership, true or false. Right, well, I can think of at least one pastor who kept the membership list in a shoebox. And if he got mad at somebody, we buy 5 cards in a shoebox. So. Wow.
City has elders, and essentially, who have been included in the enacted law.
PCUSA.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, just wow. So, I do want to turn before we end, to this page, which is on equity firms. And it's, this came from, General Assembly. And as we were talking in our presbytery, about strategic plans and an emphasis on equity and justice. One of the things that they were thinking about is how do we make decisions that are equitable across the board, and particularly dealing with people of color and other constituencies and so on. And these are some questions that we can ask ourselves as a session or committee or group before we make a decision. And sometimes it's good to pause and ask questions. And I think somebody who had been at our dismantling racism team training, which was last week, and I think I did not say that I was the co-chair of the dismantling racism team. And Steve, I'm 42, not 12. I thought about it after. So, you know, one of the signs of white supremacy, and that was raised early, is an urgency to make a decision. And sometimes all the decisions we need to make, we don't need to make so urgently. And here are some of the questions. So why are we trying to make the decision now? This is something we actually, the dismantling racism team is going to be recommending that the presbytery cabinet is sort of filtering down commissions and so on. Hopefully in the Root Ministry group has used this, and hopefully some of the churches will as well. Do we have enough information to make an equitable, inclusive decision? Have we heard directly from those who will be most impacted? And have we thought through the impact to the whole church? Because these days, not everyone who may be impacted may be on the session or on the particular committee. And maybe we do need to take the time to ask some questions to get different points of view. That doesn't mean that those people make the decision, but that they have some heart in decisions that we've made, a real effort to get that information and talk to people. What additional voices, information do we need to make an equitable, inclusive decision? And what information would lead to more equity? And certainly, I know some churches are considering these types of things, and they seek vendors and so on. My co-dismantling racism chair, say, this wasn't even me, but he sees white male that even when we were buying lunches, you know, he asked, had we considered a minority vendor? And, you know, sometimes it's just easy to go to who we know and who we deal with and so on and everything, but, and first I said, I personally don't deal in the food stuff for the church. I think that's like, no, I don't, but after I thought about it, I did.
Great on that.
Yes.
We tried for this too, it didn't work.
Yes,
But we tried.
done good work for us. So those kind of things, you know, when we made ITL made these buttons for voting, Presbyterian vote for values, all of your churches do the things on. I did catch it on that one. You know, we need to have a list of different vendors we're able to go to a minority vendor in Philadelphia, actually, who drove with the big box of buttons to Huntington Bridge Church and delivered them. So just getting, you know, thinking more about that. Or, you know, not in a church setting, but when I was working in Chicago and was on our local school council board, we had to adjust it because there was a large percentage of Hispanic people in the neighborhood, and we learned that the women didn't come out at night without their husbands, and the whole thing, we had to, change the meetings and make it hospitable to them, and the whole family came to the meetings, and we got the participation that we needed. So, we just have to think differently, pause a little, get some information. It would never have occurred to me, had we not talked to those people, because I go out anytime of night I want to without my husband. So, but if that's the culture of the people who are part of our group, that has to be considered. So we hope that that's something you might bring back to your sessions just to discuss and look at. And we'll be talking to the cabinet of the presbytery about using this as well. So I think we are probably out of time. 3 minutes. Oh, 2 minutes over. Sorry. Back
Just haven't come in yet, so I have to say.
Yes, so, well, since they're not here, anybody have any questions or closing thoughts? Yes.
I'd like to just, talk about this earlier about how moderator and some of the meeting, how the meeting went. We took that one step further. We always, in every meeting, Google Doc session, we ask every person in the session, where did you feel God closest? Where did you feel God wanted to let? That takes you away from the nuts and bolts of the meeting, to get you back to the spiritual leadership, which is your purpose. And then we invite people to share. And a lot of times, you start to look at those areas where the meeting was contentious and completely different.
So important. Oh, I forgot one important thing that I wanted to say that's been a game changer in our session meeting, but not.
Yes, so at the end of every meeting, and this is included in our minutes, our clergy session goes through and identifies what the action items are that resulted from that meeting.
And who said they do what?
And who said they would do what exactly. And therefore we have, nobody said they would do the thing. We try to remedy that. And I'm a pretty conscientious session member, but this is what goes to her saying, sometimes if the minutes are out in time, that I'll look at the, so Charese says she would do this and that. The minutes are out in time, Charese has the time to do it if she hasn't done it. So I think that is just really useful and can be used in keeping your committee chairs of various people on track, and also gives people a chance to look at what they said they would do and not be embarrassed, and also helps to plan the agenda for the next meeting. Invaluable for us, game changer. So thanks so much for coming, and happy meetings. Hope they go well.